Navigating a cancer diagnosis is huge. This is the same for any kind of autoimmune disease. And we are thrown in the thralls. We're overwhelmed, we're stressed, we're scared. And have you ever wondered, like, what are my options? Do I have to do this route? How can I make this treatment respond better? How can I feel better during this? How can I have lifelong success? What else is out there? Today, we're going to dive into that with my guest, Carly. She has navigated and healed and done her own fighting of cancer. And she got the diagnosis and chose the quote unquote unconventional way and is cancer free and pregnant with her third baby. And she is coming on today and going to tell us about her journey and why she chose what she chose and just dive into some of the options out there. So I just want to make sure everyone knows, like, you have to choose what is best for you. This is, once again, this podcast, I just want to help heal the world. And there's so many other people out there that are wanting to do the same. And I want you to have more information, more knowledge, more things that you can reflect on and choices. Like, it is up to you to choose what you want to do and have that information. So I'm so excited for this interview. We have so much fun, and I can't wait for you to listen to this. And this is going to be one you probably want to save and keep going back to, because you don't have to do everything. You may just choose one thing from it. So let's go. Hello, butthole breathers. I am so excited, like I said, to welcome our guest, Carly, to the show.
Hi there. Hello, everyone.
And I just don't even know where to start with you, because I've been following your journey for years on the InstaFace, I call it, and just so inspired by your positivity, your story, your open bookness. And so thank you for coming on here today to share with people who I know are going to learn so much from you.
Yeah, my pleasure. We were actually talking right before we went live here where I was saying that it wasn't ever my intention. Like I didn't set out to be this like advocate of holistic health or this voice for healing. But as I started sharing my journey on social media, really as a vehicle for my own healing, like I didn't want to go through it alone. And I watched the questions that came up and I watched how my shares supported others. I was like, wow, this is really supporting people. So anytime I'm invited as an opportunity to share my story or somehow contribute to other people's healing, I'm here for it. So thank you for having me.
Yay. Unfortunately, it's going to switch like gears of kind of sad. I mean, we got to start with, you got a cancer diagnosis. Can you tell me about that day?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's important that I kind of give you a little bit of backstory. I have been into holistic health for, the past 12 to 15 years. I was raised really conventionally in New York on Long Island. I grew up eating Dunkin' Donuts and Lucky Charms and an Italian family on Long Island, having pasta dinner and all of those things. But when I was in high school, my sister was diagnosed with celiac disease. And so my mom started making some changes in the house, and she started switching us over to gluten-free eating and started getting things like raw milk. And I remember this one moment where my mom got raw milk in the house and I was like, I don't want the raw milk. And she was explaining to me how, well, raw milk doesn't have the all of the hormones and it's not pasteurized and why it's a better alternative for us. And I was like, I just want the hormones in the milk like every other kid, mom. And it's an important story because as I was fighting against my mom on making these changes in my home, I was still listening. I was still hearing. I was still learning. And so when I was out on my own and got into college and things like that, and I was on my own making decisions and I had weight gain and acne and things like that. I kind of had this dialogue in my mind that knew I could change my nutrition, change my lifestyle, and make changes. And there was a point in my journey where I was working a lot with families, and I always told them this story because I was like, your kids might fight against everything you're doing health-wise in the home, but understand they are still hearing what you're saying. And
That's
so that played into my journey. I ended up becoming a holistic health coach and a yoga teacher and really dedicating my life to how to use nutrition, movement, and mindset to create a powerful life.
Mhm.
So it is a shock. It's a shock for anybody to receive a cancer diagnosis, no matter your background, no matter your history. But I felt like for me, it was even harder because at that point, I already was someone who had group programs and one-on-one coaching, teaching people how to live a healthy life.
Mhm.
And so it was November 9th, 2019. It was a super cold and rainy day in Austin, Texas. My 8-month-old son, Cruz, was sitting beside me eating oatmeal for breakfast. And I got the phone call. I'm sorry, it's cancer. And they make those phone calls early in the morning. It's never really a good thing if you get that phone call right at 9 a.m. And that was my phone call. And in that moment, there was shock, there was fear, there was devastation, there was, will I be here to watch this beautiful baby grow up? I had no context. I had no context other than I knew cancer was devastating. I was 33 years old at the time. And even now, this is 5 years later, I have full body goosebumps because I can remember that feeling of fear in my body.
Mhm.
And it was not a few moments later that I hung up the phone and I took a breath and I said, this will not be the story that I tell.
Mm.
I will be here to tell a story of victory. I
Mhm.
will be here to be the one. I didn't even think it was crazy. I was just like, I will be here to be the one to tell the story of how this healing went. And it
Mhm.
was from that moment, just a few moments after that phone call, that I said, I will never speak the words, I have cancer. I said, I will speak the words, I am healing, because I know the power of the tongue and I know the power of the language. And people will say, but how did you do that, Carly? How did in that moment you make that decision? Well, one, I think it's a God thing. I was a mother. I had my baby sitting beside me, my firstborn beside me. And it was like that mama bear fierce energy of like, I'm going to be here for my son. And because I did have the experience of holistic health and I'd done a lot of personal development work, I'd studied under, I'd been like a student of The Secret, the law of attraction since I was
Yep.
like 21. I just was into this stuff. I sort of also had this training ground so that when this big, big thing happened, I also had a toolkit to pull from.
Mhm.
So in that moment, it was, yes, I was still scared and yes, I was still overwhelmed, but I was very clear that everything I did, everything I said, every decision I made was going to be in the name of healing. And that was what I was going to speak over my life. And it was really, truly why I started sharing on social media. At that point had a pretty small following. I mean, maybe like a few thousand people just as a health coach. And I remember thinking, I can either right now hide in shame
Mhm.
because I'm the health coach who was just diagnosed with cancer, like WTF, this isn't how this is supposed to go, and I can navigate this on my own, or I can call in people to support me, right?
Mhm.
Because even with a few thousand people in the health space, I was like, someone's got to have answers. Like, I don't know anything about cancer. Hey guys, can we use groupthink here and like come up with some solutions? And it was that choice of like, I'm gonna heal out loud, not hide in shame, call in the support of my community that began the movement of what is now so much of my work and my life of sharing healing online. So that obviously there's like I could go on so much about how I made decisions after that, but that was that initial diagnosis moment and kind of the moments after of how I decided I was going to continue to step into it.
Yeah. And I mean, in the mind, I think we don't talk about this enough, even as doctors. Like, your mindset is so powerful. What you're thinking over and over and over again, whether it's I am healing or man, I'm in pain, I'm in pain, I'm in pain. What you focus on is what is going to come to fruition. What even made you go to the doctor? Like, were you sick? What did you feel like, you know, anything? Or was it just routine blood work that you were like, oh no?
Yeah, super great question. My husband and I have been avid travelers for years, and we didn't necessarily have the vision of the home and the kids. We just wanted to travel freely around the world. And so we had done, right after we got married, we did a loop around the world. We spent 14 months doing a loop around the world. We did this thing called Workaway, where you could volunteer your time helping out on someone's horse ranch or olive farm in Tuscany in exchange for food and housing. So we did it on like a super cheap budget, but we traveled for a while. And after doing that, we were like, okay, we're going to move back and save up some money and become English teachers in South Korea. We're going to become English teachers in South Korea. This is like a very typical early 20-year-old journey, right?
Mhm.
We went through, we got the training, we found the job, and a couple months before we were scheduled to leave to South Korea, I found out that I was pregnant.
Mhm.
And I say this really tenderly. First and foremost, I should say that I'm now pregnant with my third son right now. I love being a
Congratulations.
mother.
Yes.
Thank you. It's the greatest blessing of my life. And when I found out I was pregnant, I was there was a level of devastation because I didn't think that kids were going to be part of my journey. And
Yeah.
so I cried. What are we going to do? How are we going to handle this? And inevitably, we said, okay, we were trying everything not to get pregnant. The soul chose us.
Mhm.
Let's see what we've got in store for us here. And we decided that we were going to have this baby in South Korea. I found a birth center and we were going to move and birth this baby there. Well, that was pivot number one. And then pivot number two was 2 weeks before we were set to leave. I ended up with full facial poison ivy. And like my face was triple the size. My eyes were swollen shut. I think it was on my dog. I had this Morkie. She was like 7 pounds. And I think it was on her, and I'd rubbed my face on her. And so essentially, I couldn't fly. And I was like, I feel like God is giving us like some big signs not to go.
Mhm.
And so what we did was my husband's from Montana. We'd already sold all our stuff, sold our car, subletted our apartment. Like we were leaving to go to South Korea. So we said, why don't we go up to Montana and birth this baby, and then we'll keep traveling. So we find an Airbnb. I'm like, hi, do you mind if I have a home birth in your Airbnb?
I love that.
He's like, I've never had that request before, but
Uh-huh.
sure. And my son Cruz was born February 28th in the February 28th, 2019, in the worst snowstorm Montana had in 22 years. And when he was 12 weeks old, we were like, okay, it's time to go. We're moving to Mexico. So we picked up, and we're like, you got to hear, like, we are dedicated to the traveling life here. So we
Yes.
picked up and we moved down to Playa del Carmen, Mexico. And now I'm in my postpartum. I'm like 3, 4 months postpartum. I'm not feeling well. There's some hair falling out. Obviously, I'm still carrying extra weight. And I'm like, I don't know if this is just typical postpartum or if there's something else going on, but like I'm really not feeling well. And I don't feel like I'm like get bouncing back the way that maybe you would 3, 4, 5 months postpartum. I didn't know. Obviously, I'd never
Yeah.
been postpartum before. So I went to a massage therapist down in Mexico who was like a full body therapeutic massage therapist. And when she was done, she said, hey, just so you know, you have a lump on your neck. And I was like, oh, that's fine. I'm postpartum. Like, it's probably just something hormonal. I'm not going to worry about it. And she was like, okay, but just so you know, like it's pretty like protruding. I would go check it out. I hadn't even noticed, right? Like I'm in the blur of new motherhood. So I go to a hospital down in Playa del Carmen and I get an ultrasound, and nobody in the hospital speaks English. And I don't speak enough Spanish to learn to know medical terms,
Right.
but I could tell they were trying to tell me something. Like I could see that there was a level of concern when they were
Mhm.
trying to show me the report. And intuitively, my gut, not cancer at all, that was nowhere on my radar, but my gut said, I feel like something's going on. So at that point, Ross and I were like, let's just go back to Austin, take a beat, ground, get my health in order, get this baby to like a year old and like take a breath, right? Like
Yeah.
we're now like settling into parenthood, like, okay, we maybe need to change our plan here.
Yeah.
And so it was then that I got back to Austin and went and got an ultrasound done by someone who spoke English, and it was just lit up red. It was like it could be 8 different types of cancer, it could be this, that, and the other thing. And I was pretty concerned at that point. I still didn't believe that it could be cancer, but I was like, okay, something's going on here. And so with thyroid cancer, you actually don't go to an oncologist. They sent me to a thyroid surgeon.
Hmm.
And the thyroid surgeon was asking me a bunch of questions. And she was
Hmm.
like, based off of what you're telling me, this doesn't sound like cancer. It could be tuberculosis. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll take that over cancer. Like, okay. And she said, okay, lay down. I'm going to do an ultrasound on you. And like she had it on me for like, I don't know, 10 seconds and was like, no, I'm sorry. This is metastatic thyroid cancer. Like, and it's not good. It's spread, it's in your lymph nodes. Like, we need to start making immediate decisions. And I started crying a lot in
Yeah.
office. And she was like, I'm not going to tell you, I'm not going to tell you for sure. We need to do a biopsy, essentially. And so that was the leading up to that phone call that I got, right? It was like, I kept being like, no, it couldn't be. No, it couldn't be. There's no way. I'm healthy. I'm 33. I don't drink fast food. I don't smoke, like all these typical things, you
Yeah.
know? And so that was the whole backstory leading up to that moment. So really the only way that I knew was because there was a lump on my neck. And
Mhm.
so that's a really, if you have any type of lumps or bumps, like that is a sure thing to get checked out and make some moves on.
Absolutely. And so, what was the proposed treatment plan in Austin? And then, what made you go? It's funny how people call it non-conventional. Like, what made you go the route you chose?
Yeah. So that morning so in the office, she said, this looks like thyroid cancer. She
Hmm.
said, but we need to do a biopsy and then I'll call you. So she called me. I got that phone call. I walked you through that process. And she said, we can't wait. We need to get you into immediate surgery next week.
Hmm.
So you're going to have a complete thyroid removal. We're going to open up the left side of your neck. We're going to remove lymph nodes, radioactive iodine treatment, hormone replacement the rest of your life. You have to understand, I didn't take as much as Tylenol at this time. Like nothing. I mean, I still don't. I was herbs and plants and healing with the earth. So to think about being on a hormone replacement the rest of my life was pretty much the worst thing that you had told you someone could tell me. And I said, okay, thank you for that information. Like, let me take a breath and I'll call you back. So nothing happened immediately. And when I started to research it, the biggest thing that I saw was that when people had their thyroids removed, they never felt like themselves again. That was like the biggest consensus that I got was weight gain, low energy, fatigue, and like I never felt like myself again. And that was terrifying for me because I'm kind of like a high energy New Yorker. Like I've got this like fire about me that's a lot of my personality. And it terrified me to potentially lose that part of me. And it was that said, I'm not going to lose this. I'm not going to lose my thyroid. And so when I went on Instagram, I was like, what? Hey, I just got the news that it's thyroid cancer. Like, what is out there? What resources are out there? Who has information? And I really, for the first time, began to learn about all of these integrative therapies, raw organic cold pressed juicing via the Gerson therapy, coffee enemas and liver detoxification, cellular detoxification via red light therapy, heat therapy, emotional healing as an aspect of our healing, that it's not just physical, but there are these emotional wounds that we hold on to, and that can block us from healing. And so I started piecemealing it all together. I learned about Chris Wark and the book Chris Beat Cancer. And I began to find all of these practitioners around Austin. Now, this was pre-COVID. This was the fall before COVID. And so what I did was I just started like found like 8 or 9 practitioners and little detox centers, places I could go get IVs, and started putting it all together myself.
Mhm.
Well, I did that for about 2 weeks and I was exhausted. I was driving all over Austin. Like in Austin, you're in traffic. It was a lot. And I thought, I'm going to burn out doing this. And that's not good for my health either. And that's the very first time that I learned about an integrative cancer clinic, which is essentially where you can go and all of those therapies are under one roof. Now, I had heard that there were clinics in Mexico, but remember, I had my 8-month-old, I had a dog. It was like I was still overwhelmed with the whole thing. And my
Absolutely.
mom's friend had told us about a clinic in Florida. And I was like, okay, Florida just feels like so much more doable than Mexico right now. And so I did a consult with this clinic in Florida. I think it was on a Wednesday, and we packed up on Saturday. My mom and I, me, my mom, and Cruz, my son, flew there, and then my husband drove the car with like the crib, the high chair, like all of the stuff. And we lived in Tampa, Florida for 7 weeks at an Airbnb while I went to a clinic there. Now, I don't share a lot about that clinic because I don't like the doctor there. He made me cry. I felt he was very rude and off-putting. I didn't like a lot of things that unfolded there, but the biggest thing that I took away from that clinic was that the first day that I sat in the office with him, he said, "Tell me your story," like from the beginning. And I told them the story. And one part of the story is that when I was a freshman in college at Penn State, I fell and I knocked out my two front teeth and I broke the upper bone in my mouth. I had done 7 years of reconstructive surgery, including titanium implants and root canals. And he was like, "Well, that's it." And I was like, "Well, what do you mean that's it?" And he was like, "That's where this was created." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, he was talking about the connections between root canals and cancers of the head and neck, and said, "This is a hunch, but I'm going to send you to a biological dentist. They're going to do a 3D cone beam scan and we can see if there's any infection." So later that afternoon, I went to this biological dentist, and he said it was one of the worst infections he'd ever seen in his career. I had infection all through my mouth, not only in the upper bones of my mouth, but the bone where I had the titanium implants was degrading. It's called resorption. It's like where the bone's being eaten away. I had infection where all four of my root canal teeth had been removed. Infection can breed in like the socket where the tooth was removed. And so the majority of that time in Florida, yes, I was going to the clinic, but I did over 3 dental surgeries in that time, where at one point, my upper lip was sewn shut. I couldn't talk, I couldn't eat, I couldn't laugh. I mean, it was a really scary and kind of dark phase of my life. I was suffering a lot. I was in a lot of pain. Like dental work is just really tough. And mine was even harder because they couldn't get to it. Like he cleaned them out, and then I think he did something wrong, because what you should do is clean out the root canal treated teeth and then let them heal. He put ceramic implants in right away. And by doing that, there was still remnants of the infection. So the implants healed, the implants failed. So like my mouth, it was just, I documented all of this on my social media. There ended up being a time after that where for 3 months I had no two front teeth, because I was like, get this out of my mouth. So the majority of that time in Florida was really focused on getting that infection out. So by the time I left Florida, my cancer markers were down and I had gotten all of the infection out. Now, granted, I left Florida without two front teeth. I was literally walking. I was like, people are going to know I'm not homeless. Like, I obviously don't look homeless. I don't look like I got in a fight. I obviously have some story going on here. But I even have photos of my Instagram of me smiling, like, no front teeth. Like, this is where we are in life right now. So that phase of that journey was the dental journey, and I'm so grateful for it. And it's why I'm such an advocate. I think the statistic is that 98% of women with breast cancer have a root canal treated tooth on the same side of the affected breast. My healing home is at Hope for Cancer, and they send every single patient to a biological dentist. It's just the connection between dental health and disease. It's big. So that was like that big season, and that chapter was the dental chapter in Florida.
And that's not talked about enough. Everyone thinks your mouth is so separate. But even
Mhm.
like when we're doing pelvic floor work with clients, we are working on your jaw. Like it's all histologically connected when you're formed in utero. And our bodies are just so amazing of how everything's connected. But that's why, as you're saying, like it's really important to get to that root cause of like, where is this coming from? Why did this happen? Why is my body reacting in this way? Another important point I want to dive into before we move on that I'm super passionate about is that connection with your practitioner and your doctor. And you had said that you didn't like this specific doctor. You didn't feel, you thought he was a little mean to you or whatever. Like in your journey, and this is still at the beginning when you're not sure and you're trying to figure this out going against what they're telling you.
Mm.
How did you navigate that? How were you like, okay, I'm going to stay here and do this for 7 weeks, but also like, bye? Like that had to be emotionally, mentally really triggering.
Yeah, it was tough. I remember one specific day I walked in and I was like, should I get a PET scan? Like I'm learning about PET scans and would it be helpful to make sure that it hasn't gone to my lungs or anywhere else? And he was like, well, if you want. And I was like, well, what do you mean if I want? Like, can you help me with this? And he was just so short with me. And it made me feel alone. It made me feel alone in the process. And like, thank God I had my husband who's incredible, my mom who was with me every step of the way, my friends rallying behind me. Like I had an incredible community of people, but I think if you didn't have that and you were just really looking to this alternative practitioner, I mean, he was a medical doctor, but he was doing integrative cancer therapies at a clinic, an unconventional clinic. And it just kind of broke my heart that he treated me and other patients that way.
Mm,
And the thing about it was, I don't think I actually even realized how it affected me until I got to a clinic like Hope for Cancer. Because essentially what happened was when I left that clinic, I got an ultrasound. I got an ultrasound scan. And I said, would you mind looking at this scan for me? And they said, you're no longer a patient. So if you want us to look at this scan, you can come back for another week. And I was like, please make that make sense. I just spent over $60,000 there. I was there for 7 weeks. You know me, you know my family. You're not going to look at this scan. And they were like, that's not the way that this works. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like, I was like, so I need to find a clinic and a practitioner who's going to be my forever home because I understand that cancer, it's not always one and done. And I want it to be one and done for me. And I want the place that I can check in with each year and be like, are we good? Thumbs up. So when I found Hope for Cancer and I went there and they were so loving and they were so compassionate and they were faith-based and they sat beside me and they had a year-long support program, I was like, like my entire nervous system regulated just being in that space. And I think it's so important when you are looking, because people will always be like, I saw this place in Arizona and this place in Germany and this one in Florida and this one in Mexico. And I was like, at the end of the day, they're going to do a lot of the same therapies. Where does your heart feel connected? Like,
mm,
where do you feel like, oh, when you talk to them?
mm.
Because that is going to be part of the healing for you as much as the IVs and the therapies. And so I think I didn't even understand how much it affected me until I found somewhere that was so supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. And how much do you think with your cancer and cancer in general, just going through this process, meeting so many survivors, meeting people fighting every day, that stress impacts are like cancer and disease and autoimmune conditions? What's your
Yeah.
take?
Massively, massively. I mean, the statistics that I've learned at this point is that 2/3 of cancer are from our environment, from our lifestyle practices, from our stress levels, from our thought process, from the foods that we eat, from the toxins in our home, the way that we live our lives. And so while that can feel overwhelming, I actually happen to think that it's really empowering
Mhm.
because so many people will say, oh, well, it's just bad luck. You just, it was in your genes, it was in your destiny, it's bad luck. And I'm like, that's a bunch of BS. We have so much power over our health and over our healing.
Mhm.
And what I learned was that once I got to these clinics, and I ended up investing over $100,000 in my healing. $100,000 I didn't have, by the
Right.
way. Like, that wasn't sitting in my bank account. I borrowed, I did GoFundMe, I started to do businesses, I got creative to fund this. But what I found was that the very thing that they were teaching us to heal, whether the emotional work, the stress reduction, the breath, the being in nature, the walking, the alkaline diet, the clean
Mm.
water, all of these things that they were teaching us to heal could also be the very same things that we use as prevention.
Hmm.
And so these days, that's everything that I talk about. It's like the same thing you're going to use to heal is the same thing that you use to prevent. So don't wait for a diagnosis.
Hmm.
Like the current statistics are that 1 in 2 men and 1 in 3 women will be diagnosed with cancer in their lifetime. And it's going up. Dr. Tony, the founder of Hope for Cancer, says that he believes by 2030, everyone will navigate cancer in their lifetime. And what I believe is that we can do something about those statistics. We can
Absolutely.
be the ones who say, no, I'm not going to succumb to that. I'm not going to eat the crap on the grocery store shelves. I'm not going to put the red dyes in my child. I'm not just going to live this life on a hamster wheel and do what I was told I was supposed to do and live life the way that I'm supposed to live. Because if we look around, how is that going for people?
Not
Are
well.
people happy? Are they healthy? Are they fulfilled? Are they well?
Mm-mm.
Majority of people aren't.
No.
And the renegades, those of us who are, the weird ones
Hmm.
who are thriving because of these more radical life decisions we've made, it's like, that's too much. That's crazy. Why would I do all that? And then it takes a diagnosis for them to be like, hey, Carly, so what were you doing? I've
Hmm.
had people push so hard against me, so hard against me. And then unfortunately, something happens, and I'm one of the first people they call.
Hmm.
And I don't have any feeling about that. I'm always like, yeah, of course I'll share with you what I know. Here are some resources. Try this, do this.
Hmm.
But my prayer is that it doesn't take people a diagnosis to start changing their lifestyle.
Absolutely. It's harder once you get the diagnosis. If you can start early on, like you
Yeah.
said, it's preventative. And unfortunately, we're at this moment, it feels like we're in a sick care system, not a healthcare system.
Mhm.
Everything's wait until you get sick, and then everyone wants the quick pill. And that's not, that's a band-aid. That's covering up symptoms. It's not, and there's side effects to that. So
Mhm.
it's just, and doing some of this healthy stuff, especially at first, you can speak to this, is, and even though if you live the healthy lifestyle, like it can be hard and overwhelming, but once you start a snowball and get it going and rolling down the hill, it becomes easier and easier and easier.
Yeah, I mean, it's like it's with literally like anything. Like we have babies
Hmm.
and they begin to walk and they fall down and we're not like, oh, that's it. You should just give up. Don't
Hmm.
don't try and be like, come on, you can do it. It's we have patience with them. We
Yeah.
have compassion for them. We understand they're learning a new skill set. And
Hmm.
so it's easy for us to give that to someone outside of ourselves, but then we try and do something new. And it's like, oh, not working, taking too long, too hard. Could we bring that same patience and compassion that we would give to a baby learning to walk to ourselves? I mean, I remember the first time I did a coffee enema and I like sat in the tub for like an hour and I was like, okay, Carly, you're putting what, where is the water right? Like it took me so long. Like a
Yeah.
coffee enema was like a 2 hour process. And now I'm like, bam, 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 done.
Yeah.
I did them every day for 2 years in the height of my
Yeah.
healing. Why? Because I practiced it. Anything you practice, you get better. And with these healing modalities, it's like not only will it prevent, not only will it heal, but it's also going to contribute to you feeling better,
Hmm.
happier, sleeping better, better sex, better work. Like
Hmm.
every facet of our life is benefited from when we put ourselves as priority. Want to make more money? Take care of your physical health. Want to
Oh,
have better
yeah.
relationships? Take care of your physical health.
Yeah.
Like I believe it is the foundation. Like, how are you going to be a powerful entrepreneur in the world and be overweight and sick and tired? You're not. There's
Hmm.
no way I could have 2 kids, one on the way, running 2 7-figure businesses, a friend, a wife, moving into a house. Like, if I did not have my health at the foundation of everything I do, absolutely not.
And it's so hard to like, I've done that over the years, being like, in my, kind of burnout, sick, all that stuff. And like then realizing I had to take a couple times of doing it, but realize like, no, you have to put yourself first and prioritize. And I agree, those coffee enemas, man, they are game changing. I look forward to them. I have like clear brain, like the brain fog is completely gone. I
Yeah.
mean, so many health benefits. But at first I was like, excuse me, what? Like, that's
Yeah.
what I'm supposed to do, like
Yeah.
learning about them. But like, take me through, you go to Hope for Cancer, and you're like, this is going to be my home. This is going to be my place, advocating for myself. You guys come up with a game plan for treatment. What does that game plan look like while you're there? And then taking it home.
hmm So a lot of what we did at the clinic were we did juicing, we did plant-based diet, light therapy, heat therapy, coffee enemas, colonics, emotional healing work. We tested for parasites and heavy metals, essentially like really getting down to cellular health and detoxification. And that's what I found was different from like my approach and perspective as like a health coach, which is like eat well and move your body.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, now everything was like, let's distill it down to the cell.
Mm-hmm.
Let's get into the body. And everything was focused on detoxification because we come into this world as a divine child of God, whole, perfect, and complete. And the idea is to get us back to like what I call factory settings where our bodies are self-healing mechanisms. We
Oh,
are designed to,
absolutely.
right? We
Mm-hmm.
get a cut, we don't have to do anything, the body heals. It is the same way with disease. If we can get ourselves out of the way and all of the toxicity and the crappy food and the pesticides and herbicides. So much of what we did at Hope for Cancer was focused on cellular detoxification. And so then what I did was you're there for 3 weeks. So it's a 3 week stay. And then you go back home and you kind of continue this at home. So I had a graph paper chart and it was the days of the week listed on one side, and then it was my therapies listed on the top. And every day, I'd wake up in the morning, I'd hydrate, I'd take a biotoxin binder, which binds to toxins. I would do my coffee enema. I would jump on the rebounder for 10 minutes for lymphatic drainage. I would go into the sauna to sweat. I would do an hour-long walk. I would take my midday supplements, eat a big salad, like I did lots and lots of like big raw green leafy salads. I drank 64 ounces of raw organic cold pressed juice every single day. I actually ended up starting an organic juice company called Alchemy Juice because I found that all of the juices I was finding, they weren't organic and they were served in plastic. I was like, what are we even doing here? Like our juices, we call them therapeutic grade because they're
Mm-hmm.
raw, they're cold pressed, they're organic, they're in glass.
Mm-hmm.
And so I had this list of therapies that I would do every single day. And that was my work. That was my work for a long time. Now, granted, at this time, we were in the heart of COVID. And so
Mm-hmm.
I had this blessing where I couldn't go anywhere.
You
So
had
I was, yeah, I wasn't really trying to balance going to a job. My husband and I were entrepreneurs. We were not, like I said, we weren't making a ton of money. We were making enough money to get by. And Alchemy Juice really came because I was like, in order to keep doing what I'm doing, I calculated it that I needed $1,500 a month. It was like to get my IVs, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, see a lymphatic drainage massage therapist. And so I was like, how am I going to make $1,500 more a month? And I remember my mom and my husband and I sitting down one night and we're like, okay, what is that thing that like the world needs, we want to offer, and people will pay for? And I
mm-hmm.
was like, juice. We are spending an hour juicing every single morning because in Austin, Texas, a health conscious city, we can't find good quality juice. So I
Mm-hmm.
went on my Instagram and was like, hey, would anybody want some juice delivered to their door? And I think like 10 people responded. So we went to the store, we got juice, and my mom and I were in the kitchen juicing, and we found these glass bottles. And the next morning, my husband and I went out and delivered it to their door. And it, went from 10 customers to 20 to 30 within a couple months. We were in a commercial kitchen and we were like, so are we starting a juice company now? And we're like, why not?
Yeah.
Worst thing is we fail. Like we've already come into contact with the scariest thing, which is
Right.
looking your own mortality in the eyes, navigating a cancer diagnosis. Failing in a business didn't feel that scary.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're like, why not? We got to give it a go. And Alchemy Juice, we now have 3 brick-and-mortar locations. We ship
Amazing.
nationwide. But that also allowed me, sitting like that, coming up with a business idea. How do I keep funding this journey? Is what allowed me to put 3 to 4 hours a day into that healing journey.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that was in 2020. It's now 2024. Granted, I'm pregnant right now, but my routine doesn't look that much different. Now, granted, it's not 3 to 4 hours a day at all. I have 2 boys and my very busy. but still non-negotiables. I'm drinking hydrogen water every single morning. I'm taking binders, supplements. I have a sauna in my home. I have a rebounder. I'm going on walks. I'm waking up and prioritizing gratitude and faith and prayer every single day. I'm still drinking raw organic cold pressed alchemy juice. I've added more animal protein in now because now I'm not in a healing phase. I'm really focused on my like building muscle as I'm heading into my 40s. But it's like it doesn't look that much different. I wasn't like, great, I'm healed. Let's go to the bar and eat
Yeah.
some nachos. Like this is it's shifted over the last 4 or 5 years, but it's still my lifestyle. Healing is my lifestyle. And because of that, I have the capacity to now be cancer free, which I do want to share for a moment how that happened. Cancer free, pregnant with my third son, and having the capacity to live life in the way that I do. And that is 100% because of the way that I care for myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, take us through that was my next thing of like, how long did it take before you were cancer free? What did that look like?
Yeah, so I ended up going to Hope for Cancer from 2020 to, I mean, still today. Like I still will, I was just at Hope for Cancer a few months ago. I'll just go for what I call a cellular upgrade,
Mm,
IVs and all, go through the process. But I went from 2020 all the way to the winter of 2021. And essentially they said, I had an 80% reduction in the amount of cancer in my body. We watched the tumor in my thyroid shrink.
oh,
We watched there be 80% less blood flow. And they said, essentially, you are in maintenance. We're going to continue to monitor and watch you. You can come back every 6 months, but just keep doing what you're doing. And that was with no conventional intervention, no surgery, no radiation, nothing. That was with holistic cancer therapies.
mm,
And I felt on my heart that I wanted to have another baby. My mom really wanted me to have a surrogate because she was like, your body's been through so much. Like, and I said, my husband and I sat down and we understood the risk of getting pregnant, essentially. And but I wanted to birth and grow another baby. And it also felt really important for us that we gave that to Cruz.
hmm
So I got pregnant with my second son, Cash, mid-late 2021. And while I was pregnant with him, there was some progression of the cancer. I actually saw the tumor in my neck begin to grow again. Now, at that point, I felt like I had changed the terrain of my body so much that I was like, you know what? I I'm going to call my surgeon, and when this baby's born, I'm going to have the thyroid surgery. I just feel like I can handle it. I got to the root cause, right? I think about the dental infection as like the faucet
hmm
of the faucet being on, like drip,
Okay.
drip, drip, drip. And I always think, how scary would it have been if I would have just gone into surgery when they wanted me to,
Mm,
without clearing out the parasites, without clearing out the dental infections, without doing the emotional work, without changing the terrain of my body? So I always praise God that I had the foresight to put that on hold and do what I did for 2 years. So when Cash was 4 months old, I went into surgery. I had a total thyroidectomy and I had some lymph nodes removed in my neck. And I just handled it like a champ. I mean, I was so strong from everything that I had done from the 2 years prior. In those 2 years, I had learned how to truly care for myself, how to truly be my own healer. And I recovered from surgery, and I was no longer a candidate for the radioactive iodine treatment because there was no more, they essentially removed the tumor that had been growing during my pregnancy, but I had no more traces of cancer cells in my body. Because with the radioactive iodine, they say, like, we're just going to mop up the rest of the cancer cells. Well, the side effect of radiation treatment are secondary cancers. So
hmm
not only did I not want it for that reason, like how crazy is that? Like the side effects of the cancer treatments they're giving you are secondary cancers. So not only did I not want it for that reason, but because of the work that I'd done for 2 years earlier, I was no longer a candidate because I didn't have any of the circulating tumor cells in my body. So essentially at this point, I had my thyroid removed in 2022. And I can say that I'm blessed to share that my vitality, my essence, my personality, my light It's all very much here. I do take a thyroid replacement every single morning. I take a mix of T3 and T4, which is the active and inactive form of thyroid. I worked with an integrative thyroid practitioner because most conventional endocrinologists will only give you T4, not T3. So that's a tip there. And I'm me. I'm didn't gain weight. I didn't lose myself. And it's a message that I feel so empowered to share with people from two perspectives, which is one, you get to find your pathway to healing. If it's holistic, if it's conventional, if it's a mix of both of them, my only prayer is that you pause and wait and inquire into what it is you want, not what your practitioner is forcing you into, not what your husband or wife feels that you should do or your mother. How do you want to go about this healing? Because this is your life. This is your life. So the decisions that you make here, I cannot tell you the thousands and thousands of people that I talked to who said, I wish I would have just paused for a second. I
Mm-hmm.
wish I would have taken a breath and not just rushed into chemo or rushed into surgery. I didn't even know I had an option, is what they say, because the doctors make you feel like you don't have an option,
Mm-hmm.
but you do.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Tony even says cancer is rarely an immediate life or death circumstance. Like, yes, there are those cases where it's like, hey, there's weeks or months, but it often took us decades for this perfect storm of a disease to unfold. You have a couple weeks to
Mm-hmm.
decide how you want to move through this.
Mm-hmm.
And then the message that I get to tell people from the other side of it is that if you do opt in for surgery, for chemo, for radiation, for thyroid removal, or anything like that, you can also be okay. But
Mm-hmm.
it's how
Yeah.
you decide to go into that. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you bookend that baby. You do all of the integrative healing. You
Yep.
upgrade your terrain. You do the detoxification, do the mindset work. Then in the middle of that sandwich, get in and do the conventional therapies and then get right back to making healing your lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That is what I believe is going to be the most optimal way for people to heal. And I actually believe that it should be medical malpractice that oncologists tell people eat whatever you want, enjoy the ice cream, enjoy the wine, just get your chemo. Like I am it causes rage in my body that medical professionals say that to people because we know that these therapies can have such a profound outcome, such a profound impact on their outcome, on their experience of chemo. We can make chemo more effective by doing some of these integrative therapies, take away the suffering, some, not all, but some of the suffering and pain that comes along with it. So that integrative cancer approach is what I would recommend to anybody and everybody.
And that's what I was thinking. As some people are listening are probably like really triggered just because this is very like, what are you guys talking about? Like that's
Hmm.
so, wild.
Is
Um,
it?
exactly, but it should be more normal. It is, and it's just like, wow, have like take a second and pause.
Mm.
And like there are way more than you think. People just aren't talking about it,
Yeah.
doing this route these days. And I see it in my practice. I know
Mm.
you see it because you're following and you talk about it all the time. But I like how you're saying, and this is what I'm not prescribing, like I don't prescribe chemo or anything like that. But like when they ask my opinion, like how can I set myself up for success? It's like, okay, well, we got to change lifestyle and integrate and add some of these therapies. And will rally around you with a great team. But like ultimately, I can't want it more than you. You have to want it.
Yep.
And you have kind of had that same theme going out through everything you're talking about of like you decided,
Yeah.
you were like, this is how I want to feel. I don't want to lose myself. I want to go this route. I'm committed to be the very best I can be. And I wanted you to speak a little bit more on the mental component of this. Like, how did you I know some of it's like you just decide and then you move forward and that's how it is. But how do you not let it define you and like speak to the diagnosis? Because, the more you speak of it, the more you come to it. And that can be whether you have MS, whether you have cancer, whether you have celiac, whether you're in pain, low back pain. I mean, it's across the board. What tools did you have or what experiences led you of, no, this is how I'm going to feel. I'm healing, period.
I mean, I've been a student of personal development work for since my early 20s, and I will say without a shadow of a doubt that had a massive impact on how I immediately approached this.
Mhm.
So any personal development books, I mean, like The Secret is like a basic original one, but it really just talks about the power of language. Listen, the fact that we go through hardships in our life isn't what makes us unique. every single human being goes through hardships, death, divorce, disease, all of it. Like being human is tough. It's a tough experience. What sets us apart, I believe, is how who we become in the face of those hardships. And so it's like, oh my God, my marriage failed and I'm divorced and I have this disease in my body and I'm overweight. And you're just speaking life into all of that, as opposed to these things happened. And this is what I'm going to do with it. This is who I'm going to become. This is how I'm going to touch others. This is how I'm going to impact others. My sister had been going through a hard season of her life and she was just so down and out. And I was just telling her over and over and over again, who are you going to become because of this?
Mhm.
What's the story that you're going to tell because of this? So,
Mhm.
one, I think finding some level of personal development, like you literally go on Amazon and type in personal development book,
Yep.
and you can scroll through and take your pick. Personally, I also at the time worked with a lot of plant medicines because personal development is also it's the conscious mind, let's say, and I wanted to even get beyond the conscious mind. I wanted to get to the subconscious mind. And so, obviously, I believe in plants and herbs and the healing power of Mother Nature. Nothing like hard, but working with like plants of the earth and how they can support us in our healing. So, I'd spent time in Peru working with some plant medicines and things like that. And that allowed me to see things that were present in my unconscious mind and my subconscious mind and bring them to the surface. And so, I mean, my journey has spanned through literally, if it could heal, if it had the potential to heal, I've done it
Mhm.
because I just became a student. I became a student of like, okay, Carly, everything you've done in your last 33 years somehow landed you here with a cancer diagnosis. Perhaps if you want to create a different reality, you should be willing to take different actions in the future. So it's like, I'm just going to get super curious about it. So the conscious mind work through personal development, subconscious mind work. I mean, therapy doesn't really do it for me personally. I've never been like a fan of going to a therapist. I have some friends who like therapists, but like I want to get below that. It's so there's like practices like tapping and EMDR and gosh, I mean, I'm like even just like looking at my bookshelf right now. But I think it would even start with someone being like, when the student is ready, the teacher appears.
Mhm. Mhm.
And I think it could even start there with people of like, okay, I have a willingness to do this work. There's something called recall healing. I could pull some resources for you that you could put in the show notes, but it's just a willingness. Like I want your listeners, if they're feeling triggered or, you know, this feels overwhelming, is like, okay, well, has what you've done so far worked? And if
Exactly.
the answer is yes, and you're thriving and you're healthy and you have all the money and the well-being and the vitality and the sleep that you want, then just keep doing it. Like, forget what I'm saying. Like, what you're doing is working. And
Mhm.
if the answer is no, are you willing to take different actions?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's where I believe that podcasts like this really come in because there's some people this isn't going to resonate with, and there's some people who are like, that's exactly what I needed to hear because I've never thought of it like that. I've never seen that perspective. So, are you ready to be a student? Are you willing to just take the first step forward to start looking at the world differently? Everything we experience in the outer world is a reflection of our internal thoughts and feelings. That's
Mhm.
why some people can look at a sunset and see like, ah, oh, it's gorgeous. Look at the colors, look at the light reflecting. And someone's like, look at that trash on the ground.
Yep.
We're looking in the same direction, but we're seeing different things because
Yep.
it's a reflection of what's inside. So when the student is ready, the teacher will appear. It begins with the willingness.
I love that. And like you can change your life starting today. You don't
Yeah.
it's a decision right now as you're listening to this. You've also hit on this, but it's mind, body, soul when you heal. I truly believe that whether, like I said, it's low back pain, plantar fasciitis, it's cancer, it's not an immune disease, it's Parkinson's, whatever. How important is spirituality and God to you and throughout this whole process?
Yeah, it's the foundation of everything. I'm what one would call a recovering Catholic. I grew up on Long Island, New York, Italian Catholic grandparents, going to church, confirmation, big man in the sky looking down on me, super scary, like, oh my God, did I do something wrong? Am I going to hell? Am I going to heaven? My faith journey brought me to yoga and like really just believing in gods and goddesses. Like I believe that we are all wired to believe in something. And so a lot of our faith journeys take different dips and valleys along the way. And through my cancer healing journey, I just got really like I literally felt the presence of Jesus with me. And I started reading the Bible. And in that time when my mouth was sewn shut and I couldn't talk, and I like to share. I can, my husband's like an internal processor. I'm an external processor. Like I have to talk to process things. So it was a really hard season for me during those few weeks. And I would come home from the clinic. It would be like 5 o'clock, and I would be in bed all night journaling and praying and connecting with God. And I just began to watch how he was moving through me and how this wasn't happening to me, but it was happening for me. And
Mhm.
that God really used me as a vehicle to be a voice for healing for others. And I couldn't have done it without having to go through it myself. And so I am, my faith, my relationship with God, being what would even be called the follower of Christ is a very important part of my life. And it doesn't rule my life. It's just, it's woven in through every moment, through prayer, through gratitude, through acknowledgement that it's not me. It's not Carly. My prayer every single morning when I wake up is God, use me. Use my eyes, use my hands, use my voice. Let your will be done through me as it's intended to be. And so I trust that then what comes through me, with who comes through, what's unfolding, I'm like, this is God's perfect divine plan. And how much peace does that bring to my heart and to my life? And I have a really beautiful group of friends, and we pray before meals, and yeah, it's become a foundation of my wellness journey.
hmm And once again, I don't think that piece is talked about enough in healing.
Yeah.
Also, you just touched on it again. You're like, woo, we're like connected going. I've been preaching in podcasts, and if people follow me online, that you need to have quality, good relationships and that connection and foundation of community. Like, we're not meant to do any of this alone. Like, we're meant to support each other. And I know you're very passionate about that, and you host retreats now to bring
Mhm.
people together to connect. And can you speak on how you started doing that and that whole component as part of your healing?
Yeah, yeah. So people were just watching the journey through social media as I was living it. And I began to say, I need a place where I can bring women together to do this work. And the retreats are called Sacred Self-Care. And it's literally mind, body, spirit. We're eating organic, nourishing foods. We're doing the emotional healing work in community. We're doing eye gazing and connecting with women and sharing our hearts. And then we're having play, and we're activating that little child, and we're dancing, and we're remembering what it felt like to feel like me in my truest expression. And the idea of the retreats is to give people an embodiment of that, like a remembering. It's not, we're not putting anything new on them. We're helping them to remember the truth of who they are so that they can bring that back into their life. And so I run these with my best friend, Blair. And we've done 4 of them now. The last one was in the Texas Hill Country, and the next one is coming up at the end of May 2025. And the really special thing about that is that we do it in Playa del Carmen, Mexico. So we're at a beachfront property doing all of this mind, body, spirit work. And then the last day, we actually bring everybody to Hope for Cancer. And some people are navigating a cancer diagnosis, some people are not, but everybody gets to do the cellular healing, the physical healing. After all of this emotional work, we really ground them back into their body with the physical healing. And I've watched incredible friendships be born. I've watched people remember who they are, to use their voice again, to remember to play, to speak their truth, just to take a moment out of the doing of life. We are human beings, we're not human doings. And all day long, we're working off to-do lists of like, can we just put that aside for 4 days? Come into nature, come into stillness, come into play, come into community. Remember who you are, and then go back into the world as that. You can do what I believe you could do in a year of therapy in 4 days at a retreat where you can actually be with yourself and be present. That is Sacred Self-Care Retreat. Again, I can give you a link for that, but we do still have some spots for the May retreat. And it's one of the ways that, well, one, I love doing it because I love building community, but it's also one of the ways that I feel like I can give back to the community that's given me so much. It's been so nourishing for me to share my journey online, to connect with other people, to be able to support them. And I really I really like to co-create with people, even though we're on our phones and we're on our computers, and it's like, how can we really get in person together? So it's deeply profound work, and I'm really grateful to do it.
I love it. And I just love your openness and your willingness to share everything about all this because I know it's scary and it's hard and you feel really alone and isolated if you're going through this. What is one thing, like, thank you for your time. I know you're super busy. What is one thing you want to leave our listeners with and to remember, or maybe is the most healing, whatever you feel like you want to say?
The thing that I want to say is that you are worthy of your healing. You are worthy of your healing. You deserve to feel good, to feel energized, to feel strong in your body, to sleep well at night, to have powerful relationships, to love your work, to be in love, to play. You are worthy of all of that. That is who we come in as this world as. You think about a newborn baby and we just hold them in our arms and we marvel at them and we say, we're going to give you the world. And then the world conditions us out of that, the marketing and the industrialized food system. And so right now, my words are for you to remember that that's who you are and that you are still that perfect being, and to remember the truth of that and to know how worthy you are to live a life of energy, of vitality, of impact, of play. And sometimes we just need that reminder. And so that is what I want you to hear today. And what take one thing. Take one thing from this podcast. Don't feel like you need to go do everything. I'm going to start filtering my water. I'm
Yes.
going to drink one green juice a day. I'm going to
Yes.
go on one 10-minute walk. I'm gonna pick up one personal development book. You are hearing me after 5 years of intense healing and dedication to this. You
Yes.
know, people look out, my garage is full of saunas and hyperbaric oxygen and red lights. And it's like, how did you do that? I did it slowly over 5 years.
Hmm.
We underestimate, I think, what is it? We underestimate what we can do. We overestimate what we can do in a month and underestimate what we can do in a year. Like, think of the long-term vision here. This is your life, and you are worthy of the most beautiful life.
Oh, I love that. That is so perfect. And we can heal the world. So share this with a friend, share this with a loved one, share this with someone that you know is struggling through something. And like we said, take one thing and just realize you aren't alone. There is a community. You can reach out to me, you can reach out to Carly. We'll have all her stuff in the show notes. And you are going to feel great. So thank you so much for taking the time and sharing your story. That was wonderful. And congratulations on the pregnancy, on being cancer free, on being yourself, all the things. I love
Thank,
it.
thank you. Thank you so much for having me. That was super fun.